Welcome back to Access Houston on 97.9 The Box.
Good Sunday morning. You're listening to Access Houston, welcoming the Access Houston Roundtable. Whole new fresh can of folks up in here this morning. But first, she's always here. She is the Raptors. Go ahead and introduce yourself. This is Genesis Blue.
Yeah, it's your favorite Raptor MC Genesis Blue. What up, H-Town?
You know.
Hey, Irby, podcaster extraordinaire. Who else?
Oh, my name is Joe Dumas. That's Jeaux, Dumas. Here, coming to you live.
My name is Chase Bradstreet, communications director for the Houston Young Republicans. People get me confused with Rand Paul all the time.
Oh, wow. I can see that.
Okay, then.
I could see that. You're better looking than Rand Paul.
Well, thank you. One time I've always wanted to go up to him and say, give me $5,000, I'll mow your lawn for you. Don't have to go through that again.
Okay, funny. Welcome, panel. Welcome. We got a couple of first-timers. Don't be nervous.
All right.
We just going to talk because, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. First, let's go back to last week. Trump got his second Supreme Court justice nomination through. Brett Kavanaugh was sworn in, and we know nothing about him. Except for that he likes beer. And he likes beer. And he's the only person that I know that can go into a job interview and be belligerent, angry, loud, and still get the job.
Snide, rude, obnoxious.
Yes. Anybody else want to add some more adjectives?
The card provides.
Anymore? Because we know nothing about this man. We don't know how he tried his cases. We don't know what he decided on. We do know that he believes that a president should not be implicated.
Right.
But I think this is incredibly dangerous because this is just going to set into motion, what the Koch brothers and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all of them, the big money families that control what goes on, wants to do, which is radically change our Constitution, totally recraft the Constitution to add some of these liberty amendments. And it's going to happen because the conservatives has the majority in the Supreme Court. I've never seen a Supreme Court justice nominee where it was so partisan. This was the first time that I've ever seen the partisan divide when it came to the Supreme Court. And I did not like it at all because that's not what the courts are supposed to be. Our democracy is going down the drain.
He looks like he has a lot to say about it. He's taking notes.
Oh, yes. Well, we do know a lot about his judicial record because it's all the public record. The cases he's authored are there on LexisNexis. Some of them are publicly available in PDF form online. To get where he is, he'd already undergone, I think, 6 different FBI investigations. He's been on the second most prominent appeals court in the land for a good amount of time, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which is where the plurality of Supreme Court nominees come from because it also handles appeals from every administrative court in the land. Say we don't know anything about him is kind of bizarre, frankly. He didn't become a well-known public figure until, of course, all this came up. And it wasn't a job interview. He wasn't there in his judicial capacity. He was there as the accused. And when you're accused of something with insufficient evidence, it is, of course, appropriate to... I mean, that was his venue, his one time where he gets to go up in front of everyone, lay out his case, and defend himself against a smear job, essentially. The behavior of the Democratic senators was appalling. The last time we saw something like that was the very way that they handled, very partisan way that they handled Clarence Thomas, and then before that, the very partisan way that they handled Robert Bork, leading to within the legal community the creation of a verb called borking, which is to unfairly tarnish someone's reputation.
I'm not a big fan of Kavanaugh, and I think the way he handled himself was definitely inappropriate. And I must admit, it's very tough to prove what the women were accusing him of doing, but everyone isn't lying. I really think that he has a history of like all those people are not going to come out of nowhere and make these allegations. Like, what is the gain from that? Like, what? Like, how would Miss Dr. Hill? Oh, no, not
Ford.
Dr. Ford. Thank you. I'm thinking of Anita Hill with Clarence Thomas. All right, but Dr. Ford. Like, what is the benefit of accusing someone of something so?
Well, first of all, the only actual allegation to have any sort of credibility behind it was Dr. Ford's. The later one, Miss, I think her name was Ramirez or something. She went, and when she was trying to contact potential witnesses, admitted to several of them that she wasn't sure about the facts of the situation. The one that Avenatti came up with was farcical on its face. The whole, a consistent pattern of gang rape at parties with tons of witnesses, that was somehow hidden from public view for a long amount of time is ridiculous. The further ones, the fourth one I think was retracted almost immediately once it got media attention, and then there was an anonymous one. And now, as for what they gain out of it, being a trial lawyer, and having studied cognitive science formally and kept that up intensely, I know that there doesn't have to be a tangible benefit. Just because one party isn't lying doesn't mean the other party is lying, right. because of the defects in human memory. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, I think in either 73 or 72, essentially disproved the whole previous concept of recovered memories.
Right.
And went in and over the next 40 years of research, analyzed in depth how false memories come up every time you recall a memory. Absolutely. She's done very important work in our criminal justice system with a group called the Innocence Project, which has secured the exoneration via DNA evidence of approximately 350 people, and in over 70% of those cases, it was a case where the eyewitness was certain by the time of trial, and yet the DNA proved that couldn't have been the case. And a couple of these had 4 people essentially saying that guy has to be it. Now it would be one thing if she was consistent as naming who the aggressor was from the get-go, but she named it in therapy in 2013 with what is God, I forget her name, but the most likely therapist is a lady who practices, I think it's called EMDR therapy, which has extremely high rates of what they call researcher bias, which is where
also that is fine and dandy, and I'm a mental health psychotherapist, so I understand everything you're saying. Here's the other question though: if a person has all of those issues and people are fighting like heck to get them not nominated, and you have probably 100 other people that you could choose from, you would still go with that person even though there's so much back push from this person that you want to have. So if you're at a job, if you're a business owner, and you got a person that is totally not likable, and you got to provide customer service, you're going to hire that person anyway just because you want them there, or are you going to go with some another really good candidate too?
Do you want to establish the precedent of there being a heckler's veto in Supreme Court nominations?
According to you, it's already there. It's happened before.
Well, I mean, we didn't back down and let there be a heckler's veto when Clarence Thomas was going through it. When Bork was nominated. I believe the Democrats had a slight majority, and so it came down to a party line vote anyway.
What about Gorsuch? I mean, they didn't even want to. They didn't want to sit down with him. They wouldn't even accept.
Exactly.
They wouldn't even have a pre-interview with him. Like Mitch
But they'll
McConnell
allow
has
this drama
done more obstruction. Mitch McConnell is the one that's really the cause of all of this. Okay, because he's got his whole, I got to stay in power hat on, and he's had it on for a long time. And I hope he gets what he got coming come 2020, because Mitch McConnell is the reason for all of this mess. He wants what he wants when he wants it. Yeah. Forget the other side, because it was mind blowing. The hypocrisy was. I can't even think of an adjective or an adverb to describe how ridiculous it was. They want to start crying about the Democrats. Oh, do you not remember what you all did in the Obama administration? You didn't do anything. You wouldn't let anything happen when it came to that. And so them crying this time around is a bunch of BS.
There you go.
What we saw last week,
the reasons are entirely different.
I'm sure they are. But you know what? Women. What does that say to women? What happened last week? Like,
they
to
won't
me,
be
what
believed.
it says to women is like, we don't believe you. If you get sexually assaulted, so what? If you get sexually harassed, so what?
Especially if we don't have time to deal with your issue right now. We're just gonna push it through.
You
we don't
got,
have time to
your body. We don't care about that.
We devoted a lot of time to it.
Listen,
look,
what we saw last week
she could have
was
put
raw
the
power.
whole issue to bed by living up to the spirit of Federal Rule of Evidence 106, or called the Completeness Doctrine, and giving the entirety of the notes that she had from her therapist.
Well, then
right?
why was it that she wanted the FBI investigation and he would not even answer the question when asked time and time again during that?
Because he had already had the FBI investigate him 6 times, and when you're confronted
for that,
when you're confronted with
for that.
I don't think for that.
Thank you.
Look, he said that he would agree to whatever the Senate committee recommended. And if the Senate committee recommended an FBI investigation, he would have been fine with it. It's almost like we watched 2 different confirmation hearings.
We did, because our backgrounds are different, and that's just what it is. So, yes, we did. Absolutely. And I wish we could trade places every once in a while, and it would help so much in America. But unfortunately, we cannot do that.
Because what I saw during that week was just a display of raw power.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a display of raw power, and they want to keep it. And I can't be mad at it, but you use some finesse when you're doing something. Like, do they have to be so blatant? Like, does it have to be so blatant? You know what I'm saying? Let's move on.
Yeah.
Because the man is in there. He's going to be there for life, not unless there's some way that he can be impeached, which I doubt.
Yeah.
And Trump will probably get one more in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this country's going down. Like, we're not. It's not going to be the same America.
For us, for other people, it's going to be just fine. And that's the issue.
I want to get on this Waller County voter registration disenfranchisement fraud that is going on. So much so, are you all privy to this story?
No.
A little bit. You can review.
So the Board of Elections in Waller County for voter registration, a lot of PV kids registering to vote, and the county gave instructions on what the students needed to fill out.
Is their address? The address was a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what the county gave to them. So they filled it out, and then they turn it in, and then they say, well, this isn't filled out correctly. But we did what you told us to do. And so now you want to take back these thousands of voter registrations, and you want to say this the day before the deadline
right,
to register to vote.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What is going on here? I understand that the woman who runs it, like, she works out of her house, and when people go to the office, like, they They never get an answer. They don't get the phone call because
Oh,
the
my
woman
gosh.
works out of her house. Once again, voter suppression at its finest. And that's why when I have conversations with people of color and they say, I don't vote because my vote doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count. Like, well, if your voice don't matter and your vote don't count, then why do they keep making it so hard for you to vote?
Exactly.
Bingo.
That's the one. That's the
Didn't
one.
this happen in Fifth Ward as well? Earlier this year, wasn't there like? Didn't the county wipe away a whole bunch of voter registration? Or they challenged it in Fifth Ward, I believe.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, no, I don't have all the facts in front of me, but it was hundreds and hundreds of registrations challenging in the Fifth Ward area in particular. So yeah, no, it's definitely happening all the time in this area, and it's deplorable. I mean, I don't understand how it's even possible. But there's these loopholes that these elected officials just kind of just push us to the side, and then we have to find a way to get ahead of it instead of at the deadline.
Well,
like, how
they
do
need
we
to
how,
do something
how did it
about
happen at the deadline?
gerrymandering?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Because
That's
that-
a big issue.
That is the gerrymandering.
That's
Gerrymandering and redlining.
So when I moved here to Houston and I looked at like the political demographic and how the districts are divided, it makes no sense how South Houston and North Houston is in the same district and it's connected by like a thin line stripe. Now I was sitting here like, what in the world? But I realized that gerrymandering, the Supreme Court has, speaking of the Supreme Court, they have said it was legal to do gerrymandering and things of that nature. But Houston, it just looks so lopsided how they can just carve out what areas they want people to be in. If you look at the county commissioners or the commissioners court, you can see that the people where district or where precinct that they represent, it represent the people that have basically carved out to represent them. And it was just baffling to me to see that.
I had Commissioner Rodney Ellis on the program last week. That's why we didn't get to do it last week because he took him all the time. And he said that Texas is a blue state, really.
Wow. Wow.
But it's red because people don't go
Other
out and
games.
vote.
Yeah, people don't vote.
People don't vote.
Yep.
And I was like, I could see that. I could see that. I could see where the major blue, like especially in the 16 election, blue here and then red in the small places.
Right.
They all show up to vote, and they vote
and
all
they
the
do.
way down the ticket, which is another issue because we're just all going to be like, vote for Beto. But then there's a bunch of other people that you're just missing, and they're important. They're very important too. And that's another issue. It's education. It's awareness.
Isn't this the last election where we'll be able to vote straight ticket? Yeah, okay, I believe so. So that's going away. I don't know how I feel about. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I know
probably
how
make
I
you
feel
a bit
about it
more aware of who's on your.
It's our job to.
Exactly.
They're not going to help us. They made it very clear. It's our job to host these block walks, get out there, knock on doors, educate, awareness, because the other side is doing that. As much as we want to complain, they're doing it.
Look, let me tell
they
you.
winning, honey.
And that's where all of my respect comes from for the Republicans.
They
I
do
mean,
it. They back it up.
they get it done. They don't care about it. F whatever you have going on. I am going to make this happen, like it or not. And I respect that. I respect that. I may not like it all the time. Is it in my best interest? No, because anything that they've ever done hasn't even been in my best interest. Not as a
for
black
long
man
time.
in this country. I mean,
Right.
But that is it. Another one. Kanye, Jim Brown, Donald
not
Trump.
to speak this name anymore.
Even Donald Trump looked uncomfortable.
It was just like
And he was just saying
That's
things
actually
that were
on my
very
notes
surface.
right here. It says, if Trump looks like WTF is wrong with this guy, that's something.
Yeah.
yeah. But you brought up Jim Brown. That's a listening to NPR a few months back, and he's always been like that. He's always been a very conservative yet socially strong person, and the difference is Jim Brown has been transparent and clear with his message, even if you don't agree with him. Like you can, like.
And he's from the old
He's
school.
from the old right.
And in the old school, blacks were Republicans.
Very conservative,
when you look at
right.
the fundamental values of the Republican Party, which aren't anymore because look who they got in the office. All of that went out the window. But when you look at the fundamental values of the old Republican Party, the real grand old party, not this new mess that we have now, that is black people. And that's what we were. Yeah. Even Martin Luther King was a Republican.
Yeah.
So when it turned,
right,
it got, I don't know what the Democrats did. I don't think I'm old enough to remember what had happened to make blacks from the 60s who were Republicans.
Well, the change happened. The change happened very, very, very slowly. It didn't just happen in 1964 once the Republicans got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. The last white majority Democratic county in the state of Alabama, which I moved here from, only turned red in 2014. Very slow progression. A lot of that happened in the 90s, and you had a long period of time where southern states would vote for Republican presidential candidates, but still have Democratic-controlled legislatures or Democratic Congress people that they sent to Washington. Very complicated issue as far as that. In a lot of ways, the old party of Goldwater is still going on today.
Where they at, man? Tell me where they are, Chase.
They're everywhere. I'm a Goldwater right here. And if you would be willing to meet some of my friends who are black and who are Republicans, they may be able to share with you their perspective.
That's a good idea. Okay.
No.
Yeah, bring them on the program.
I'll give you their contact information. I'm not sure they want me shouting their name on the air.
Yeah, bring them on.
So the thing is about the Republican Party and Democratic Party and black people. Truly, old black people, religion plays a big part in politics, right?
Yes.
Religiously, with black people, they are Republican on social issues. My mom is 67, my dad is 72. On social issues like abortion, gay rights and things like that, they are vehemently opposed. They vote. They agree with the Republicans on that, but they vote Democratic because of the physical issues, and they feel like the Democratic Party has their back. And I think the turn happened once FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was in power for so long in the Great Depression, and he was a Democratic president. He offered during the Great Depression, he was offering all these jobs and offering all these programs to help people, and I think that was the thing that slowly shifted towards blacks being for the Democratic Party.
That makes sense.
And then
That's exactly right. That's
and
when it
then
started.
going towards Lyndon B. Johnson helping the blacks and things of that nature. I can't remember. I got a story from a veteran when I was in law school. I was in the veterans clinic. I got a story that during the World War II, in the Navy, you had the blacks and whites were separated, and I think it had to be Lyndon B. Johnson. I don't want to misquote it, but I think it's Lyndon B. Johnson, where one day he just woke up and said everybody could be integrated, effective immediately.
It was a 1948 Harry Truman.
Harry Truman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely.
He said that effective immediately, everything's going to be integrated, and I think once you have those things that happen, I think black people took notice to the Democratic Party, and then slowly but surely it started, going that way towards them. Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears real quick because something came out this past week that I just so happened to see watching the news, and I was just like, wow, I'm still going to be alive when this happens. Scientists have come out and said that if we don't stop these emissions, that by 2040, 2030, I said, okay, the news report I saw said 2040. Oh, yeah, and then you do have 2030 right here. that this Earth could be almost damn near a fourth of the way gone. We see with what we've witnessed right here in Houston in the past 5 years, you know, and then we got Hurricane Michael, which pounded the Florida Panhandle.
Yeah.
And when I hear politicians, and it seems as though those on the right, they still don't want to agree with the scientists when the proof is right in front of our faces, and we're living it every hurricane season with the extreme weather. Like, are they ever going to accept what the people who do this and do the research for a living say? I know that they've been denying it for 10 years now, but every year is the hottest year on record. Every year there's way more powerful storms. And I don't know. I mean, we're out of the Paris Agreement. Things that, you know, we were starting to do to go the right way. Now, you know, we're shifting back because coal is it.
Yeah. I mean, I think when the dollar bill gets involved, I think you can get a lot of people to turn a blind eye to it. And I think they can pay their own scientists to say fracking isn't doing this, or emissions aren't doing that much, or everyone on the other side is being paid, you know, so it's really tricky when money gets involved.
slope.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, we're talking about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, part of the UN, right?
Yeah.
Their little thing. And one of the powerful reasons why a lot of people on my side of the aisle don't get reticent about that is because the IPCC goes far beyond what the scientific community says, and always says there's going to be some sort of gigantic catastrophe. They've been saying that since they were formed in the 70s. And it dissuades people on the right from being able to take an honest look at the literature because of the alarmism. Now, if we're going to talk about science, the notion that the hurricanes have been getting stronger has been kind of in the popular pop science mind for a while, but right now there's not really any scientific proof for the reason why. There's not any scientific proof that the hurricanes have been getting more frequent or stronger, right? Much less that anthropogenic global warming has been a contributor to that. People talk all this time about there being some sort of 98% scientific consensus. First of all, that's a little bit of a logical fallacy called an appeal to authority. I happen to think that the theory is sound.
What do you believe, Chase?
I happen to think that the theory is so sound that it's likely that there has been a human effect on the climate.
Right.
What a lot of activists use as a substitute for evidence is detailed computer modeling. Which usually once you get a decade past that loses its predictive ability, because as it turns out it's a very, very, very hard thing to predict. It has probably a number of factors so close to infinite that an attempt to model it is at this point eludes us. But in general, you know, like for a long while, the face of the IPCC was rightly or wrongly, considering his work with them was sometimes only tangential, was a guy named Dr. Mann, who engaged in some pretty serious academic misconduct and kind of, you know, poisoned a lot of people's minds against being able to view it objectively. Generally speaking, though, if we want a long-term plan to reduce carbon emissions, then we need to reduce the gigantic regulatory burden that accompanies trying to open up a new nuclear power plant. Those the only byproduct from that is steam and a pallet of nuclear waste, which you can bury in the desert somewhere.
That sounds practical.
Well, I mean, it is practical compared to all the other alternatives. I mean, the IPCC recommends a $27,000 per ton tax on carbon emissions, which would probably tank, if that was applied to every developing country out there, they would never be able to get past being a developing country. And if that were applied here, people complain about the cost of gas, the cost of electricity, it would be completely infeasible, especially considering when you raise the cost of, transporting goods around or transporting people around, that raises the cost of literally everything in the economy. If the alarmism were to go away, and if people were to say that, to be able to give more reasoned predictions, and if people were to be able to I guess not want to accumulate more attention and prestige for their little UN panel, then people would be a lot more willing to countenance things.
I'm going to give you the last word on that. That is our time. Actually, we're overtime.
Yeah.
Got to remind you, early voting begins on October the 22nd, running through November the 2nd. Election day is November the 6th. We have passed the deadline to register to vote. So if you are not, shame on you. Okay. And
good luck
panel,
with that.
thank you. Genesis, Irby, Joe,
Thank you.
Chase.
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
This was great. So you guys will be back?
Yeah.
I'll try.
Anytime you'll invite me.
Absolutely.
So thank you guys for coming in. Thank you for listening to Access Houston.